Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes renting fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Straight Shift. You all know how passionate I am about people loving their car. Everyone should have the perfect car for them. Now, that may not mean it's your dream car because, we don't all have the budget to have the car of our dreams. If we did, I would be out there driving a McLaren. No offense to Maggie, but the perfect car is one that is perfect for you right now based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. And that's what I do for my clients. But what happens when you can't find that perfect car in your local area? This actually happens to me quite a bit, especially over the last year with the low inventory levels that we have seen in the market, thank you, pandemic, and also when I am searching for what I call unicorns for some of my clients. Those are the rare or hard to find cars, like a 2018 Honda Fit in yellow. The yellows are fairly rare. Or right now I've been shopping for a Subaru Outback with a manual transmission, which they stopped making after 2014. So sometimes my clients have very specific requirements that may be a little difficult to find in the market. Fortunately, we have this thing called the internet. Yay! And with sites like AutoTrader and Cars.com, they make it very easy for people to shop for cars all over the country and hopefully find exactly what they want. I'm going to take a minute to do a disclaimer here. I will say unequivocally that I do not like the site CarGuru. I find that the inventory is totally inaccurate. I don't know how often it updates and how it integrates with the dealers, but half the time I find the cars listed there are not actually on the dealers' lots. I don't like that they give their not so informed opinion on whether a car is a good value, because that is based on simply what that price is and compared to the other prices of similar cars. It's just a statistical calculation. It has exactly zero to do with the quality of that car. So if you do use CarGuru, completely disregard that whole good deal, great deal BS thing that they put on there. So anyway, I prefer AutoTrader and Cars.com. I also search on the dealer site specifically, depending on what I'm looking for. But buying a car outside your geography, what we're going to call long distance car buying, can be riskier, and logistically, it can be a pain in the butt. So today we're going to talk about how do you go about buying a car long distance to minimize the risks and the hassles. I'm going to break this down into three categories: buying new cars, buying used cars from a dealer, and buying used cars from private party, because they're all a little bit different. They have some things in common, but they each have their own quirks that you need to understand if you're going to try and buy a car long distance. So let's say you're looking for a new car, but none of the dealers in your immediate area have the exact one that you want, in whether the colors or the features or all-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive. For some reason, your exact specs, what you want, are simply not in inventory anywhere in your town. I firmly believe that you should be able to get exactly what you want, that you should not have to settle or compromise when you're going to be plunking down, 20, 30, 40, maybe even more $1,000 on a vehicle that you're going to be driving every day and that you may keep for a while. I don't believe in settling in life, but especially when you're talking about that kind of money and something that's as important as a car. To this day, my mother, when my dad got her Toyota Corolla, it was back in 2003, they didn't have a pretty blue one on the lot. My mom's favorite color is blue. She has always wanted a pretty blue car. Well, they didn't have one on their lot, nor was blue offered in the base trim level that they were looking at, because mom really doesn't need any bells and whistles on the car. But her choices were silver, almost silver, and not quite silver. And it was like non-color, non-color, non-color. And to this day, that still annoys her. She still has that car. It's been very reliable. It serves her well. But the fact that she had to settle for what she calls a non-color has irritated her for the last 17 years. I don't think your car should do that to you. So I don't believe in settling, especially not when you have a lot of options out there. And this is another reason why you should not leave your car buying to the last minute. Give yourself time, because otherwise you're going to be forced to settle. So if a dealer in your area does not have what you want, you've got several different options. The first thing you should pursue is what is called a dealer trade. Franchise car dealers play musical inventory with each other all the time. It's a standard practice in the industry. If they don't have the car you want on their lot, they can call up a whole list of other dealers, not normally in the same city. They usually have to go outside the immediate geography, and I'm not going to get into the details of why, but they will have different dealers that they have a relationship with, and they normally have a good trade relationship with, that they know they can call and be like, hey, can I have this one? I'll give you this one, or what do you need? They just kind of horse trade inventory back and forth so that everybody can sell to their customers and get their customers what they want. What they do is they literally trade inventory. There's a way the money works behind the scenes that you don't even need to worry about. But they can usually get the car, as long as one of their dealer buddies has it on their lot. They can usually get that trade done and have that car brought onto their lot to sell to you within a couple days, sometimes even that afternoon. I've had dealers bring in cars within a few hours for me. It's great. Different dealers have different trading power than others, depending on the volume of cars that they move, what they've got on their lot, and the relationships that they have with other dealers and how nicely they play together. It can affect the pricing if you're getting a car that's dealer traded. For example, if that other dealer had already put an add-on package, window tint and pinstriping or what other crap they decided to put on the car to jack up the price, those things can't typically be removed, and they then charge the cost of those things to your dealer who's trying to do this trade for you. So be sure to ask, okay, theoretically, if you can locate, and that's the term you need to use, can you locate a car for me or do a dealer trade to get the car that I want? And make sure they check and see, because what they do is they can go into the computer system that is shared by all of the franchise dealers for that manufacturer. So they can go into Toyota's system or they can go into BMW's system and they can see each other's inventory. Now, dealers can set some flags to hide inventory if they've got a vehicle on their lot that they just don't want to trade and they don't want to be bothered with calls about it because it's a really popular car. They can hide their inventory from each other, but in most cases, you're going to be able to do some trades. So they're going to look in that system and see who's got what, and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, here's one here, and here's one here, and here's one here, and I trade with these two guys on a regular basis, so I can probably get that one. Before you commit to them doing that, because most dealers are going to want a deposit from you in good faith before they make that trade, you need to ask them, okay, theoretically, assuming you can get that car, what kind of numbers are we talking about? Get the negotiating done and in writing before they do that dealer trade, because that's what's going to uncover whether or not there are going to be any additional costs associated with the car that will affect the ultimate price that you pay. So always say, theoretically, if you can get this car for me, what do the numbers look like? And get that in writing. If inventory is tight, the dealers might not be able to trade. That has happened. And it may be on specific types of cars. For example, last year, after Subaru redesigned the Forester, and it's still one of the hottest small SUVs on the market, the top touring trim, which is really nice, in white with the tan leather interior, absolutely the most popular color combination and trim level, and they were hard to get. Dealers weren't trading them. It was almost impossible to get one of those unless you happened to hit one. The dealer got one in stock. It arrived off the truck from the factory, and you were able to buy it right then and there. So that can happen. But in normal inventory situations, you can get dealer trades done, and it should not affect significantly the price that you can negotiate for that car if you do your job being a savvy negotiator. If dealers cannot, for some reason, do the trade, or they can't do it at a good price, some dealers will just be jerks and say, oh, well, if we've got to do a dealer trade, we're not going to cut you a deal. We're only going to give you a deal if you take something that's off our lot, in which case you're like, bye-bye. But if you have to search on your own, you can do that because you can look up what are all of the, say, Honda dealers or Lexus dealers in surrounding geographies. You can go on the manufacturer's website and say, find a dealer and put in your zip code and look within a certain mile radius. Internet's a great research tool. And then just go out there. It takes time, obviously, to go through each individual dealer website and their inventory. And don't assume that because it's listed on their website that they actually have it on the ground in stock. Sometimes it'll say the car is in transit. Sometimes it'll look like it's there, but maybe it's already sold or it was dealer traded yesterday. Dealer websites are not always up to date. It's not a real-time system. So always call and first confirm that the car is available. It is best if you can find a car within your own state. Here in Charlotte, when I'm having to look outside the geography, I'll look within a 2-mile radius. I might look up at Greensboro or as far up as Raleigh. That's 2 hours, 3 hours away. If you can keep it relatively close, then if you stick within your own state, it means that the dealer's going to know the correct tax rates. They're going to know the correct DMV fees. They're going to be able to handle the DMV paperwork for you. It won't be much different than buying from your local dealer. If you're working with a dealer that's outside your state and they don't normally do a lot of business with people in your state, maybe you're working 2-3 states away, then you may have to tell them what the tax rate is. And of course, they'll verify it. They may not know what your DMV fees are. You may have to help them along a little bit. They may have some more challenges doing the DMV paperwork, and I'm going to get into those details a little bit more here in a second. So the closer you can find the car to where you are, the easier and the less headaches you're going to encounter. When you find the vehicle on the dealer's website, pull up the window sticker. Most dealer websites, there will be a link somewhere on there where you can pull up the actual window sticker for that exact car. The reason for doing that is because the dealer's website that lists what color the car is and what the options are in the transmission, that information somebody put in and they may not have done it right. I have found lots and lots of errors because it's a human equation. That window sticker is the window sticker that goes with the car that came from the factory, so you can see exactly what color is it. Is it the moonlit silver, or is it the basic silver, or which shade of black is it? Is it the carbon black or the flat black? These days there's so many different colors for cars. They may have 3 different types of silver and 2 different shades of white and 3 different shades of black. So you want to make sure you know exactly what the car has on it, what the colors are. Does it have the right engine? Does it have the right transmission? Does it have the right drivetrain? That is how you verify that, yes, this car matches the specs that you want. Do not rely on just the dealer's website description. Look for that window sticker. Okay, another reason to hopefully find one at a dealership that's reasonably close to you is that it will make it easier if you have to go to that dealership to pick up the car, because some dealers still insist on that. Though more and more these days, positive thing that's come out of the pandemic is that more and more dealers are realizing, oh, hey, you know what? We can sell cars online and deliver them to people at their houses. Amazing. I've only been telling them this for 20 years. But a lot of dealers now will offer free home delivery within a certain radius. Maybe it's 30 miles, maybe it's 50 miles. Some even offer up to 100 miles. So that will make the logistics a lot easier for you. And hey, it might even be a perk that you can get a car delivered to your home where your local dealer might not have been as motivated to do that. So when you call one of these dealers, especially if you're talking out of state, you're going to have to ask certain questions. However, before you let them know that you are calling from out of the area or especially out of state, get the negotiating done first. Do not tell them that you are from out of state until you have already settled on an acceptable price to the car. Because if they know that you're shopping around out of state, they know that means you can't find the car. And so that gives them the upper hand in the negotiations. So don't give them any ammunition that's going to hurt you at the negotiating table. Get the negotiations done first and then say, okay, so do you handle the DMV paperwork for my state? That's the first time they should know that you're calling from out of state. Typically, if you are financing the car, and you can certainly finance the car through a dealer out of state, that's no big deal. The bank in that situation will usually require the dealer to do the DMV paperwork no matter what state you're in, because they want to make sure that they are properly recorded as the lien holder. They know if they leave it up to private citizens to do their own DMV paperwork, that most of the time the lien holder information does not get recorded correctly, and then the bank doesn't have the title to your car. So if you're financing, the dealer will probably do the DMV paperwork for you. If they are in an adjacent state and they're used to doing business, like here, I live in Charlotte and we're right on the North Carolina, South Carolina border. So the dealers in the greater Charlotte area can handle North Carolina or South Carolina paperwork pretty easily because they do it all the time. But they will either do it themselves, their internal title department can handle it. Sometimes they will use a third-party title company that will handle it for them, that has better expertise. That's a decision that's up to the dealers. Typically, if they do use a third-party title company, it will cost you more because obviously that company is going to charge fees. So expect to pay a couple $100 more to cover those costs, but it can still be worth it not to have to go to the DMV yourself, I swear. All right. The next question that you need to ask is, can you deliver the car to me? And as I said, some dealers can do this. Some will deliver the car with their own drivers, either for free or for a nominal cost, maybe a couple $100, $200-$300. They might use their salespeople if you're fairly close by. If it's a little bit further away and they don't want to not have their salesperson actually selling cars, they often use retired people that they know in the industry. Maybe it's, hey, this guy worked for the dealership 10 years ago, but he's been retired and he and his spouse just drive cars. So it's really nice. Sometimes you get these, older folks that are retired and they have nothing better to do and they like to drive around in cars and they'll deliver cars to you. They're usually really awesome people. They don't always know the paperwork inside and out, nor can they show you all the bells and whistles on the car. But that's what the manual is for, and the 4 million videos on YouTube. So it's not as big of a deal these days if they can't show you how to pair your phone to the Bluetooth. Believe me, there's a YouTube video for that for every single car out there, at least one. Some dealers, if they don't have their own internal staff or contractors that can do that delivery for you, they can arrange the transport for you for a fee. And what they do is they get on a system called Central Dispatch. And that is just like it sounds, a dispatching system where independent truckers and trucking companies are on there, and the dealership can submit the job to say, hey, I need you to move this car on an open trailer from here to here in this time window. And the truckers will bid on those jobs. And so the dealer can get on there and put the job out there, and they can look and see what other jobs for similar mileage have cost. They're like, yeah, we can probably do that for somewhere between, $400 and $500. And they won't know the exact cost until the trucker actually confirms that they're taking the job and that they will take it at this price. But the dealer's handling that for you, and that can be convenient. And it also kind of puts them on the hook for all of that actually happening. Sometimes you pay the transportation fee to the dealer. Sometimes the dealer says, yeah, we'll arrange it, but then you'll pay the fee directly to the trucker when he drops your car off. If the dealer does not handle transportation, a lot of them, because it is a pain in the butt, don't even want to get into that. It's just not something that they want to deal with and risk taking on any liability for. They say you're on your own with transportation. This is where it gets a little more complicated and raises the pain in the butt factor, but it can be done. There are companies called transport brokers. Central Dispatch is not a system that the public has access to, but there are companies that are brokers that do have access to it that will act will find those transporters for you. These brokers are not created equal. So you need to vet them. Sometimes it's a really good company and they haven't, make sure any of them have insurance, but they're organized and they have good communication. Sometimes it's a guy in his basement that has access to central dispatch and a business license, but I wouldn't necessarily trust him to transport a lawnmower. So you have to ask these questions. The truckers are not great typically at communication. And a lot of times these brokers they'll tell you about what they think it's going to cost, but they don't guarantee that quote. And I have seen them come back and tell you it's going to be double what they originally quoted you. And that ticks me off. So I have narrowed it down when I have to transport cars myself. I use a company called Sherpa Auto Transport. And they happen to be located here in Charlotte, which happened to be a coincidence, and actually met the owner networking. But the reason I like them is because they do guarantee their price quote as long as you confirm it within a certain window. Transport prices can change. They are market fluctuated. So if you don't confirm within, maybe 48 hours, there's a chance that price can go up, especially if you're going into a holiday period. That happened to us over the holidays. But they will guarantee the price and they will put up to a certain, I think a couple $100 of their own money into the deal if they can't secure the truck at the price they quoted you. So that's a nice feature. They're the only ones I found that have that. And I've just found they have a very professional process. They have outstanding communication. And I've just never, ever had a problem with the transport when I have used them as the broker. So typically with a broker, what you're going to do is you're going to pay a small fee up front to secure that transport to the broker. And that's the part of the fee that the broker keeps. And then the balance of that you pay directly to the trucker. And that's the amount that the trucker actually bid the job for. The broker obviously has the right to make money for doing their part of it and connecting you with the trucker. But then you have to pay the trucker when your car arrives, and you have to pay him or her either in cash or in certified funds. So that's what you can do if you need to coordinate the transport yourself. All right, we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, this is probably going to be a longer podcast than normal because there's a lot of information to cover, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when it's a used car that you're looking for, either from a dealer or through a private party. I'll be right back after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a great price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 704-248-8706. That's 704-248-8706. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
Ah, the Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
Welcome back to the Straight Shift. Today we are talking about how do you buy a car long distance, whether outside of your state or within your own state, but in another geography. Before I talk about how to buy a used car and what some of the quirks are with that, I do want to go through the actual purchasing process between the paperwork and the money when you are working with a dealership. And this will apply whether you're buying a new car from the dealer or you're buying a used car from them. You actually have to do the legal transaction, paperwork and money. Some dealers today, this is another thing that has come out of the pandemic that's actually a good thing, have figured out this whole online buying process. And part of that has been influenced by the pandemic. Part of it has been influenced by a lot of the new online car dealerships like Carvana and Vroom. And I did a whole podcast on what you need to know about those, because there's a lot of risks with those guys, but there can be some benefits. So if you're interested in that, want to know more, episode 53, I talk about the truth about online-only car dealerships. But they are forcing the rest of the industry to come into the modern times and realize, oh, yeah, we can buy things online. Amazing. So those dealers that are aggressively looking to compete and keep up with the times, they will have a formal online buying process through their website and through secure document servers so that you can legally sign documents online. They do hold up in court. I use Adobe DocuSign for my contracts with my clients. I've been using that for years. It's funny that the dealers are just now figuring out that you can sign paperwork without actually having pieces of paper. It's amazing. If they're not quite up to that level of modernization, they will do the old school way, which is FedEx the paperwork back and forth. So if you have them do that, first, they're probably going to ask you for a deposit to hold the car to secure the sale so that they don't sell it out from under you while you're getting all this paperwork and money stuff figured out. So be sure, what do we need to do to secure this car and be able to mark it sold? Because I have had a dealer sell a car out from under us once, even though we did give them a deposit, but don't get me started on dealers that do things like that. But most dealers will ask for a $500, maybe $1,000 deposit if it's a more expensive car that they'll take on a credit card. But if they FedEx the paperwork to you, ask them to please send you pictures or scans of that paperwork before they stick it in that FedEx envelope and send it off so that you can make sure they got it right. I had this situation come up over the holidays with that little yellow Honda Fit I mentioned I was looking for. Client was up in Oakland. I found the car down in the Los Angeles area. And I asked them 4 times, send me copies of the paperwork. Just text pictures of it to me. I don't care, but I need to see this paperwork before you stick it in the FedEx envelope so that I can just verify that everything is correct so that we don't have any problems. Well, I don't know if it was because this dealership just didn't have their act together or because it was the holidays and things were crazy, but they did not send me pictures of it. And so when they sent the FedEx package never arrived. I'm like, where the hell is the paperwork? Give me the tracking number. Always be sure to get a tracking number. And I looked at the tracking number and the package was in FedEx purgatory because it was an invalid address. They had fat fingered the client's address on the FedEx label, which led me to believe they had probably also made that mistake on the paperwork. So needless to say, I called the finance manager back and read him the riot act. And he's like, yeah, I'm so sorry. We did put the wrong address on there. I'm like, well, check the paperwork too to see if it's wrong on the paperwork. Yep, sure enough, it was. So they had to completely redo the paperwork, resend a new FedEx package, which could have easily been avoided had they just sent it to me in the first place like I'd asked so that I can verify these things. People make mistakes, especially over the holidays when the dealers are so busy. I totally understand that. My job is to make sure that I catch these things so that they don't look like idiots. Well, they looked like idiots. But anyway, we got it all worked out. So ask to see it ahead of time. That also gives you the opportunity to ask any questions. Don't just verify that they got your name and address correct. Really look over the numbers. Make sure that everything syncs up with what you negotiated. And if you have any questions, now's the time to ask it before they stick the FedEx package in the mail to you. Do not send them the full price, the full monies for the car until you review that paperwork. If you are financing the car through the dealership, no big deal. That'll be part of the paperwork that they send you. And typically you can send that down payment back. If you're paying cash for the car, these days that you can either put a certified check in the FedEx return package with the signed paperwork. A lot of the dealers are preferring a wire transfer now. It's cleaner. It doesn't take as long for the check to clear. And if they're going to be transporting the car to you, believe me, they are not going to release that car for transport until there's actual money in their bank account. And a wire transfer is the fastest way to do that. But don't send them that money until you have seen the paperwork and you have signed the paperwork. You may be able to put a certain amount on a credit card so you can get those beloved points, but there will be a limit to that because the credit card processing fees are killer. So ask the dealer if you can put on a credit card down payment and how much that would be. And then, of course, don't forget to call your insurance company and tell them that you bought this car, especially if it's being transported. It's better because once you've signed the paperwork, it's actually yours. And so if something happens to it on the transport truck, yes, the transporters have insurance, but I never rely on someone else's insurance. Be sure you call your insurance company and have them add that car to your policy before the transporter picks it up, or if you're going yourself to pick it up before you do, obviously. This is true whether you're buying a new car or a used car from a dealer long distance. It's essentially the same process, and it works with franchise dealers, it works with small independent dealers, or even large independent dealers. But when you're looking at a used car, there is an added step that you need to do. And this is true if you are buying it locally as well. And here's my soapbox. Are you ready? I bet you can guess what it is. Pre-purchase inspection by a qualified mechanic. Even if the car that you're buying is only what I call gently used, it may still be under the original factory warranty. It might be certified pre-owned. And the risks of there being something wrong with it are lower. And that's great. But if you are buying it long distance, you have not had the chance to go and look at the car yourself. Some people are perfectly okay with that. And if there's somebody at the dealership you can trust to say, hey, can you go look over this car for me? And I will usually ask if there is a woman at the dealership who can do this, because let's face it, women notice more details than guys. So if you trust someone there to be your eyes and go look over that car really super critically and tell me, are there any blemishes anywhere on the car? Any scratches, any chips in the paint, any wear in the seats? If you can trust someone there to do it, great. But typically, you need to have someone that actually works for you do that and be your eyes. And that's where I always recommend getting a qualified mechanic to look over that car. Because just because a car is still under factory warranty or it's a certified pre-owned car doesn't necessarily mean that it won't have cosmetic issues, or it won't have, potentially something mechanical that was missed, or something in the body or the electrical that was missed. There's always some amount of risk with buying a used car. So I always recommend the Lemon Squad, because it doesn't matter where in the country you are. It doesn't matter where in the country the car is. They can go out, send a qualified mechanic out there. They have a great process. You can learn more about them at lemonsquad.com. There are some other companies that offer similar services. I've been using the Lemon Squad for over 10 years, and they've done a great job for me. I use them all the time. I just got a report back on a manual transmission Subaru today. Came back great, but they did show some things we didn't know about. There was one little dirt smudge on the headliner by the dome light. Okay, not a deal breaker, but we knew that. We knew that the tires were a little low on tread. Well, it also revealed that the tires were dry rotted. So now we know we absolutely will have to get new tires right away before my client can register it in her home state. The car is in Virginia. She lives in North Carolina. All okay, not deal breakers, but now we have the information. And guess what? It's also a negotiating point. So it's just good to have more information than less information to mitigate your risks. So if you're buying a used car, whether it's from a dealer or even a private party, you definitely want to have that pre-purchase inspection done. And the Lemon Squad allows you to do it anywhere in the country versus having to find a local shop and then see if someone at the dealership will take the car to the local shop. And then you've got to call and pay over the phone. And they don't always have the same processes. So companies like the Lemon Squad just make life infinitely easier when you're buying a car long distance. Now, when you are buying a car from a private party, it is a whole different ball game. And I don't normally work with private parties for a variety of reasons, not the least of which that my lawyer doesn't like me to do it because it potentially puts more liability on me. But sometimes you just have to, like with this Subaru, manual transmission Outback, that's a glitter covered unicorn. There aren't that many out there. And most of them that are out there, at least at a decent price point, are private parties. So it requires a certain level of trust to develop between the buyer and the seller, and a lot more diligence on both sides to verify that everything really is on the up and up. When you're buying from a dealership, dealers are regulated to a certain extent anyway by the DMV of their state, and there are some laws in place to protect buyers in those situations. When you are buying a car from a private seller, it's no different than buying a table from a private seller from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. It is a complete buyer beware, caveat emptor situation. So you have to be extra careful. Most of the people that are selling their cars privately online are just good, normal people who are trying to get a little more money out of their beloved vehicle than they would have gotten trading it into a dealership. But unfortunately, there are dishonest people and scammers out there that ruin the party for everybody else and force us to be extra careful and very skeptical. Most scammers target people selling cars because they pose as long distance buyers with some sort of BS sob story. And that's why private sellers can be very wary and skeptical of even legitimate buyers because they don't know if you're legit or not. They have to kind of figure that out for themselves, especially if they're savvy about the scams. I did a podcast, I think it was episode 38, about how to sell your car privately and avoid those types of internet scams. So if you want to know more about a lot of those scams, I have that in episode 38. But more and more scammers are now targeting car buyers thanks to Facebook Marketplace. Facebook Marketplace can be a really good platform for shopping for cars, especially if you are looking for a less expensive vehicle. But the scammers have figured out that this is just a prime fishing ground for their criminal activities. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of potential victims out there for them to go after. Bastards. So the reason Facebook Marketplace is so popular with scammers is because you have the pictures of the item you are selling. Unlike Craigslist, which is still very text-based, Facebook, you scroll through Marketplace and you see all these pictures and you have the, bright, shiny object factor. Believe me, I have bought like 3 or 4 home decorating things that I was not looking for simply because I saw them on Marketplace. I was like, I like that. And I went and bought it. Didn't need it. But people do that with cars too. So it's also very easy for them to place ads on Facebook Marketplace thanks to some third-party tools that are out there that are designed for legitimate car dealers, but unfortunately, they have some weak points and that scammers seem to be taking advantage of them. So you do have to be a lot more careful buying from a private party and make sure that the car ad that you are looking at, especially on a place like Facebook Marketplace, your scammers don't typically go on places like AutoTrader or Cars.com because those are not free. You cannot post stuff for free there. And they're not going to spend money. Believe me, they're cheap bastards. So they're going to go on the free sites like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. So, and they target people who are looking for very, very, very cheap cars, which is extra evil because they're targeting people that don't have a lot of money in the first place and for whom if they lose $1,000, it can be devastating to them. So this is why scammers are the lowest form of pond scum on the earth. Don't even get me started. So really quickly, I'm going to talk about how you can identify these fake car ads on Facebook Marketplace. And I need to put together a video on this because it makes a lot more sense with the visuals. But the number one red flag is that the price of the car is way below market value. I can look at cars and because I do this every day, I know what market value is. So I can spot them in a nanosecond. You might have to, if it looks like it's too good of a deal to be true, it probably is. You can always check Kelley Blue Book values to see. And if it's way below market value, it's probably a scam and a fake ad. So, for example, they might show a 2014 Nissan Altima with only 60,000 miles that would normally have a market value of $5,000 or $6,000, and they have it listed for $1,800. Most of those fake car ads are the price of the cars are $3,000 and under. So right there, you need to be wary. Another thing they'll do is they usually post these ads as car dealerships, and I put that in big quotes. And the dealership will often have a really stupid name because very often these scammers are not in the United States and English is not their first language. So they come up with these really stupid names for their dealerships. And they will have an address and it shows on Google Maps in your local area. But if you actually Google that dealership's name or you Google that address on Google Maps, doesn't exist. Totally fake. So really easy to verify. They will also often put multiple identical ads. sometimes hundreds of them for every single city in the entire country. You understand these scammers are part of organized crime syndicates. This is a very big business, and these guys are serious criminals. It's not just always some individual person, working in an internet cafe, if those even exist anymore in some third world country. These are organized crime rings that do this. So if you click on their so-called dealership profile and look at that, you'll see all of the things they have listed on Facebook Marketplace, and you'll see it's the exact same ad everywhere. That means it's a scammer. You can also look, a lot of them will post the VIN number for the car because it makes the ad look more legit. But guess what? It's a fake VIN number. I can look at the VIN number and usually tell you that it's fake, but I'm a nerd that way with VIN numbers because I look at them every day. But what you can do is there's a website called decodethis.com, and it's a VIN decoder. It's free. So you can copy that VIN number out of Facebook Marketplace, stick it in the little box on decode this, click the button. And if it's not a valid VIN number, it says, could not find VIN numbers, isn't valid. So that right there will tell you, okay, this isn't a real car. If you do reach out to them via the Facebook Messenger, is this still available? Send field. You will automatically get a reply back. They have autoresponders that tell you to email this other email address to get more information. They will not communicate with you through Facebook Marketplace. They want to get you out of that platform and into email because they're turning it over to their base level. These organizations, have levels of scammers. And so your entry-level scammers vet people. It's very much like a real car dealership. You got your salespeople, you got your managers. Scammers work the same way, sadly. So if a seller through Facebook Marketplace immediately directs you through an autoresponder to a private email address, and very often in that autoresponder, they'll give you some completely BS story about, oh, I'm helping to sell this car for my sister-in-law or my aunt, some BS sob story. Please contact her directly at this address. That means it's a scammer. 100% of the time, that's a scammer. So if you encounter any of that, report the ad to Facebook as a scam, report the dealer's profile to Facebook as a fake profile, and we just go on from there. There's only so much that these platforms like Facebook and Craigslist can do to control these criminals. But that's how you identify fake ads on Facebook Marketplace, so don't fall for it. But how do you buy a car legitimately from a real car ad and a real human being that is just selling their car but long distance? Normally, you do have to reach out to them. And what I'll do is if they have it on Marketplace, if it's an inexpensive car, they may only be selling it there because, why would you pay, the $50 or $60 to advertise it on Auto Trader when the car is only worth $3,000 in the first place? Makes sense. But if it's a $10,000 car, the good folks are going to put it on something like Auto Trader and Cars.com. So you can always see if the car that you see on Facebook Marketplace is also listed on Auto Trader or Cars.com. And if it is, great, because that pretty much guarantees that it's a real ad. And you will typically have to contact the person through that platform. Very few people are brave enough to put their actual email address and, God forbid, their phone number into an ad. But when you contact them through the platform and introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm interested in your car. Is it still available? If so, I would like to schedule a time to talk to you, or please call me at this number. What you want to do is set up a telephone conversation so that you can ask questions about the car. Yes, you can ask questions via email and text, but here's why I believe in talking on the phone. It gives you the opportunity to really verify that this is a real person selling a real car, and allows you to establish a rapport. Get a feel for that person. What's their personality like? Did they seem legitimate? It allows them to get a feel for you and make sure that you're legitimate. You're having to build a little relationship here to build some trust in order to get towards this transaction, which has risks for both parties. It's also a lot easier just to talk through this list of questions, and I'm going to give you a very lengthy list here in a second about the car. So what questions should you ask? I always start with, so why are you selling the car? I don't actually care about the answer to this per se. It's more of an icebreaker. and allows me to get more of a feel for the person and their situation and how open they might be to negotiating versus the actual content of the information that they give me. But it's a good icebreaker. Then I ask, are you the original owner? Where has the car been titled, or where has it lived if they know? For example, the car may be for sale in a southern state, but the car actually lived in Chicago. This Subaru that I'm looking at, the seller is in Virginia, but he's only lived in Virginia for the past year. He bought the car in Chicago and lived in Chicago for, the first 5 years. So it's actually a northern car, not a southern car. Therefore, I knew I had to be worried about rust. But in that conversation, he told me that when he bought the car from the dealership in Chicago, he had the rust protection stuff put on the car when he bought it because he knew that rust would be an issue. So, take those things with a grain of salt, but I was able to get that information from him through the conversation. I would not have gotten that information had we been having this conversation via email, most likely. Then you can ask, have you ever been in an accident or an incident? Have you backed into the mailbox, backed into your garage door, had a grocery cart in the parking lot? Has the cart ever been smoked in? I always ask that question. You can ask, does it have any aftermarket equipment? The Subaru had a tow hitch that he added. That's no big deal. But, if they added an aftermarket radio, oh yeah, it's got an aftermarket radio that has Apple CarPlay. Okay, well, that's kind of cool, but was it installed correctly? Who installed that? Where did you get it? A lot of times people do that work themselves. It causes problems with the car's electrical system. So this is where you can ask these questions. Then you can get into how well they've taken care of the car. So where have you serviced and maintained this car? Did you do it at the dealership? Do you have a consistent mechanic? Get them to talk about their maintenance strategy, how well they've taken care of this car. Ask them if they have records of all that maintenance. Did you keep all the records for the car? When was your last service and what was done to the car? Some savvy sellers will list these things in the ad, which is great. You can then talk through that and verify it. Sometimes you have to ask, are there any issues? Is there anything that you're aware of that is not working or that the car needs? If the mechanic told you, hey, your car needs this, but you decided that it wasn't worth doing it because you're going to sell the car. If you start having these conversations, you will get more information and it will give you a better opportunity to evaluate whether this information is accurate, if they're being truthful with you. Asking if the car has been garaged, especially if it has lived up north or has it been sitting out under a tree and maybe there's damage to the paint on the roof because birds have been pooping on it for the last 3 years. Ask about the cosmetics. Are there any noticeable scratches, scuffs, dents on the inside? Are there any stains or tears or scuffs or notable wear in the interior? Pictures don't tell you the whole story. And again, this is how forthcoming and seemingly honest is this seller. The seller that I've been talking with about this Subaru in Virginia has been fantastic. We had a conversation. I found out that, he had a really cool job that I found interesting. We chatted about that. He was an engineer, so I kind of knew he was probably picky about certain things and the details that he gave me. We were able to build a good rapport, and I felt confident that he was being truthful and honest with me to the best of his ability of what he knew about the car. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I just take this information at face value. Trust, but verify. So I also asked, do you have the title in hand? Most people that are selling their car privately will, especially kind of below that 10,000 or below or around their price point, will have the title in hand, but they may not. They know I still have a lien on the car. Okay, well, if you have a lien on the car, then there are going to be some extra hoops that you have to go through because the person doesn't actually have the title. The lien holder, the bank, has the title. Fortunately, most of those lien holders will have a process and they will actually help you with the purchase of the vehicle, with that transaction on their end. So you just have to know that you've now got to talk to them and find out what is that process so that you get the title. Still, have the car inspected, pre-purchase inspection. So you need to ask the seller, hey, are you cool with me ordering an inspection? Obviously, I'm going to pay for that. I'm going to have the Lemon Squad come out. Have you heard of Lemon Squad or whatever other company you're using? They may ask you for, yeah, I'm comfortable with that, but I would need a $500 deposit that would be refundable, but just to cover my insurance deductible. If whoever this mechanic is that come out, because they don't know who this person is, you won't even maybe know who the mechanic is that's coming out. They just might want that to cover their insurance deductible. If something were to happen when the mechanic is test driving the car, it's like, okay, that's something that you and the seller can work out if you're both comfortable with. But definitely order that pre-purchase inspection and order a Carfax, because most private sellers are not going to have a Carfax report for the vehicle like the dealer would. So this is where coughing up $20-$30 for that Carfax report is well worth it, because this allows you to verify that information about how many owners, what states was it titled in? Was it titled in a northern or otherwise wintry state? Therefore, it could have rust issues. Are there any challenges on the title? Was it titled in a state at a time when there was a hurricane and maybe it's a flood car? I have a whole podcast on what to look for on a Carfax, but it's definitely important to have that just to verify the information that you have gotten from the seller. So once you have kind of gone through all of this diligence, now it's time to do the actual transaction, paperwork, and moolah. The biggest challenge with long-distance private party buying is this process. Obviously, your best option is to be able to meet that person in person and do the paperwork and give them the money at their bank. But that may not be possible. So, especially with the pandemic situation, but maybe you found the car too far away. So you have a couple of other options, but there's some more trust that comes in here. Regardless, you're going to need paperwork. The two pieces of paper you're absolutely going to you're going to need a buyer's order, which you can just go online and Google private party car sale, buyer's order sample, and a billion things will come up. But you'll also need the title to the car, and most car titles have to be notarized, at least the seller's signature. So be aware, wherever the car is titled currently, does that title have to be notarized? In which case you and the seller are going to have to meet somewhere, or the seller is going to have to go and find a notary and notarize their signature. You also may need the DMV documents from your state if they have documents that also have to be signed by the seller. For example, North Carolina has both a damage disclosure document and an odometer disclosure document that have to be signed by the seller, that puts them on the hook for the accuracy of that information. So you will need to have them sign those documents as well. So know what paperwork is required by your state, because it's your DMV where you are registering the car once you purchase it. That drives what documentation you need. In terms of the title, if they have that title in hand, ask them to text you a picture of the front and back of the title, just to prove that they have it and to verify that there's not a lien holder listed on that title, that it is free and clear. They might get a little uncomfortable with sending you a picture of the title, but you just say, hey, I just need to verify that it is a free and clear title. The money gets a little challenging again, because it's this horse trading, a chicken and egg thing of, they give you the signed title. Those are legal documents that they've sold the car to you, but then there's the money, and which do you do first? And do you give them the money and then suddenly find out that the car is something happened to it and transferred, or it's a piece of junk? This is just where everybody gets very, very nervous, and it gets very, very complicated. You can pay them via a certified check, but those can be faked, and there is a certain amount of time before those truly, truly clear our banking system. So I really do not recommend those for long distance purchases unless you're working with a dealership. You can pay, obviously, via places like things like PayPal and Venmo and Zelle. Some of those offer a certain level of buyback fraud protection. They're not really designed for car transactions, and there usually is a limit to the dollar amount that you can transfer. Same thing with a wire transfer. There can be a limit depending on your bank and obviously banking regulations. So just be sure you understand what those limits are if you're going to be operating somewhere around them. If everybody is really, really nervous, then there are escrow services out there. And here's where you do have to do your homework, because the escrow services are what scammers claim to be using. And that's actually where the scam is they have a fake escrow service. Like eBay, auto buying protection or something. They'll come up with some name that sounds legit, but is really not. So, if the seller suggests an escrow service, be sure you vet that is a real escrow service. If you're the one suggesting it, do your homework and suggest it and say, hey, I'm thinking we should use this escrow service. Here's a link to the one I'm thinking about using. What do you think? It just has to become an agreement between the two of you where you're comfortable. But one of the biggest ones is, wait for it, escrow.com. Hey, great, easy. And that can be a good option. And they have a good service because they are specifically designed for car purchases. So they offer protection specific to automotive transactions, and they have some add-on services like lien holder payoff services. So if the car does have a loan on it, they can handle paying off the lien holder for you. Title collection services, so they can make sure that the title is transferred correctly. And they often have recourse if for some reason the car arrives to you from the transporter in a condition other than you expected. So these are the different ways that you can handle the paperwork and the money when it is a long distance purchase. But again, call your insurance company. Make sure you work with a transport company that's legit if you're not going to pick up the car yourself. And then, of course, once you get it home, you are now responsible for doing all the DMV paperwork, going there, paying them the taxes, and find out you may have to have the car inspected in your state and take that past inspection certificate to the DMV with you. Normally, all this has to be done within 30 days of the purchase. So get it inspected if need be. Pay the taxes, and the tax rate is unique to your state. Sometimes it's just unique down to your county, and it's based on the selling price of the car. So the DMV will tell you what that number is and then wait impatiently for you to write the check. There may be personal property taxes that you have to pay up front too, like we have that in South Carolina. So yay, now we got to pay personal property taxes and the sales tax on the car and the tag and title fees. So you're not done writing checks until you've made that trip to the DMV. So as you can see, buying a car long distance can get complicated, but it is very doable if you understand the process and you do your diligence. You have to take the time to do that diligence. But this can be worth it if it means finding that perfect car, especially if that perfect car is something of a unicorn. Thank you for bearing with me. I know this is the longest podcast I have ever recorded, and I probably should have broken it up into 2, but it's good information and something that I've been doing a lot over the last few months because of the market situation and just some unique clients that I've had. And I wanted to get that information out there because we are moving more and more and more to buying things online, and there is a way to do it right and there's a way to do it wrong. So I hope this information was helpful, folks. Until next time, drive safely. I'm out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, the Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or the Car Chick.